We got to talk about the Toronto Raptors, man. We got to talk about these Toronto Raptors. I can't I can't let this slide. And what I mean by I can't let this slide is I don't want this to be a team that goes under discussed with how well they've been playing so far this season. They're 13-5, secondary behind the Detroit Pistons, and they're they're just a much better basketball team this season. And you can attribute some of that to the confidence they're playing with having somebody in the half court like Brandon Ingram that they can rely on to take more of the shot distribution away from Scotty Barnes, take some of the usage pressure off of Scotty, and you pair that with the fact that they still have players like RJ Barrett. Emmanuel Quickly is playing relatively okay. I think he turns the ball over a little too much, but as far as his shooting is coming along, it's gotten better over the course of the season. And they have dudes on the bench that are really, really nice. Like I really like Jamal Shed as a backup point guard, right? For example, there's just real energy to this team. But don't let me convince you. I'll just read out the stats for you that kind of tell you where they are this season. They're sixth in points per game. They're seventh in opponents' points per game. And they're top 10 in both offensive rating and defensive rating, both at sixth in the NBA. How honestly, if you could give a team the most improved player award, it would be the Toronto Raptors. Last season, they were the seventh worst scoring offense in the NBA. The seventh worst. This year, they're the ninth. Well, I think everything just updated a little bit. Yep, actually, everything just updated a little bit. So, actually, they're ninth in points per game, fifth in opponents' points per game, ninth in offensive rating, and fourth in defensive rating. Last season, they were seventh worst in points per game. They were 18th in opponents' points per game. They were fifth worst in offensive rating, and they were 17th in defensive rating. That's almost a double. Not even almost. That's literally a double-digit jump in just about every category as far as those four are concerned. This team, as a collective, is playing really, really well. They're very good at sharing the ball. Their defensive versatility, despite relying very heavily on someone like Jakob Poeltl for rim protection, is one where they still create a lot of on-ball pressure. Um, they force a lot of turnovers. They force 17 turnovers a game, which is top five in, or near the top five in the league so far this season. They protect the 3-point line better than most. They're top five, holding opponents to 32.2% from beyond the arc. This is a team that they're just getting it done. They're just getting it done. And they were able to rely on Brandon Ingram to get them a game winner the other day to kind of extend their winning streak that they've got going on as well. But something that needs to be pointed out, Brandon Ingram, 21.8 points per game, 3.7 assists. And keep that in mind. Keep that assist number in mind. 19.5 points for Scotty Barnes. 5 assists per game. Yes. Emmanuel Quickly, 15.5 points, averaging 6.1 assists. RJ Barrett, 19.4 points, 3.8 assists. And then Jakob Poeltl, who's also missed a few games, 10.7 points, 1.9 assists. But then you have Jamal Shed off the bench. He only averages 6 points, but he's averaging 5.5 assists. That's the second most on the team. I'm saying all of that to say that this team is really good at sharing the ball. They average nearly 43 that's rebounds. They average nearly 30 assists per game, which is top 5 in the NBA this season. So you are, as the Toronto Raptors, you're a top 5 scoring offense. You take care of the basketball. You're top 5 in terms of turning the ball over less than most in the NBA. You're literally fifth with only 14 turnovers. You are one of the best ball sharing teams in the NBA. You're one of the best ball moving teams in the NBA with nearly 30 assists per game, which is top 5. And you're a team that does really well at getting to the paint. That's a really important thing too. This Raptors team, I think, understands that they're going to be a struggling three-point team. They're going to be a struggling three-point team. Like RJ Barrett shoots just around 36% on 5 attempts. Emmanuel Quickly, just around 37% on nearly 7 attempts per game. That's pretty good. Scotty Barnes, 39%, low volume though, 3.2 attempts. And then Brandon Ingram, 31% on nearly 5 attempts per game. Like, they've got a couple of guys that are shooting above 40% from beyond the arc, but the volume isn't there. They're one of those teams that, even though as a team, they're shooting at a high clip, they're shooting 37%, which is just outside of the top 10. They understand that that is one of their biggest weaknesses. That's why they take the third least of anybody in the NBA. They understand what makes them great. They have two mid-range scorers in RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram. Primarily Brandon Ingram as a player that you can actually hand the ball to and ask him to operate in isolation. I think one of the biggest steals last season, and we didn't know it at the time, was Brandon Ingram from New Orleans to the Toronto Raptors might have been the biggest godsend, not only for the Toronto Raptors, but I think honestly for Brandon Ingram's career. I think we were getting to the point where we were starting to underrate Brandon Ingram and forget that it was only a few seasons back where he was an all-star. And he has the passing chops. He has the individual ball shot creation in terms of being able to operate as an on-ball, lead generator that you can give the rock to late in games and tell him go get a bucket. He can really do that for you. Just proved that the other night. Brandon Ingram is someone that archetype-wise is exactly what the doctor ordered for this team. Very similar to how the Houston Rockets desperately needed this individual shot generator, this guy who could just come in and fit right next to everybody as this off-the-dribble offense first, go get a bucket whenever you need it, small forward, and they end up getting Kevin Durant. You essentially got the watered down version of that in Brandon Ingram for a much better price point and probably a much easier, locker room presence as far as I guess the idea of Kevin Durant maybe not sticking around and different things like that looming over, as opposed to Brandon Ingram. He's locked down long term now. And I think another thing is really important when you compare those two is KD was in conversation for Toronto when they first were really shopping around before eventually coming to Brandon Ingram. KD was the muse of exactly what kind of player they were looking for to begin with. The fact that Brandon Ingram came available and it not only mirrors that ideology very well in terms of his play style. He's always been slightly compared to Kevin Durant in a lot of different ways throughout the course of his career. Always considered the light version or the watered down version or something like that, of course, because Kevin Durant is in a completely different echelon as a scorer. But he's always, when you look at the build, you look at the player type, right? All of those things. He's always been associated with Kevin Durant as far as that's concerned. So all you did was get a watered down version that also comes with a little less maintenance. He's not as high maintenance, given that he's not nearly the caliber of superstar that Kevin Durant is, both within the NBA or globally recognized, right? And you get him, he comes in, he's a quiet dude, but he just comes in and he kills. He comes in and he goes and gets buckets and he does his thing, and he's been really, really productive for them. And I think the most important thing for him this season is the way he's helped free things up for Scotty Barnes. Scotty has been asked to do so much over the past 2 years. Scotty Barnes was the original Cooper Flag as far as the point guard position thing was concerned. What I mean by that is Scotty Barnes, as interesting as he is as a potential ball handler, is never somebody that you would have really considered to play the point guard position. Yet over the last 2 seasons, Scotty Barnes' experiment at the point guard position has been something that they've had to deal with because they need somebody who can be a real initiator, a real play starter for them. And they just could not find anybody to be more reliant than Scotty himself to do it. And so his on-ball usage was so much higher than it should have been for a guy who's more of a utility player, very similar to Cooper Flag. Notice, Cooper Flag is playing so much better now that he's playing at the small forward position. I think all of his statistics across the board have increased in the positive direction, where even at the point guard position, he was playing decent, but playing back at his more natural small forward position, he's been much more comfortable, and it looks like the game is coming to him a lot more naturally because I think he's playing in the archetype that he's best suited for. And Scotty Barnes is in that same situation right now. And the place where that translates the most to me, obviously the 3-point shooting, I think has really helped them because there's more space, because now you have to worry about RJ Barrett. You have to worry about Brandon Ingram. You have to worry about the floor spacing that Emmanuel quickly brings to the table. Sandro Mamukalashvili has been really solid off the bench for them as well, and been somebody who's brought another scoring presence off that bench. I mean, they have real dudes around Scotty right now. Some of these guys have already been here, and they're just playing top tier basketball compared to in years past where things were a little wishy-washy in terms of, I think guys just were not really sure what their best role on the team was. I think things have finally kind of consolidated themselves in a way where everybody knows exactly what they bring to the table and how that fits on this team best. And now Scotty, he's averaging a block and a half and a steal and a half a game with 5 assists, nearly 8 rebounds a game, and he's shooting nearly 40% from beyond the arc and 50% from the field. Dude is shooting 50. I'm going to give him the exact numbers because I don't want to cheat. He's shooting 50, 39, 85. I mean, that's for a guy who came into the league with one of his biggest question marks being his ability to shoot the basketball, right? Very raw prospect. A lot generated off of being a high energy guy with good defensive tools and someone who you thought had the upside to maybe have a little bit of ball handling chops, but you just weren't really sure because he was still so raw as an overall prospect. To get to this point where you can make the argument that right now Scotty Barnes is a top 10 two-way player in the NBA. Like, as far as going both ways, offense and defense, I think it's actually safe to say that just from the stats alone, let alone what you actually see on tape when you cut the film on, Scotty Barnes is a top 10 two-way player in the NBA this season. And that's opened up mainly by the fact that the guys around him are playing competent basketball, and he can rely on guys to fit within the roles that suit them best. RJ Barrett can be a knockdown 3-point shooter and somebody who can give you a little bit of on-ball chops as a slasher. Brandon Ingram is mainly a mid-range threat, but he's somebody that can give you a lot of isolation play, which forces the defense to give him so much attention, opening up the floor for others. Emmanuel Quickly's best asset has been being able to shoot the 3 ball and move the basketball a lot this season and be that first pass or that extra pass to kind of keep the offense going at a high rate. This team knows who they are, and that's what's going to make them really special this season. And that's what's going to make them a team that nobody wants to face in the first round of the postseason. I don't know where they're going to end up when it's all said and done. But what I do know is that this Raptors team in a playoff setting is going to make it a really long 7 games for somebody. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below. How do you guys feel about the Toronto Raptors start to this season? I think they're a team that, do I think they're championship bound? I don't know if they're there just yet. But they're a team that I feel like their play style translates well to the postseason. And as far as the stats are concerned, they always say, right, if you have a top 10 offense and you have a top 10 defense, that's a perfect recipe to be a team that's going to make a long run in the playoffs. Well, right now, they're top 10 in points per game, and they're top 5 in opponents' points per game, and they're top 10 in both offensive rating and defensive rating. So I would say that so far, the formula is working out relatively well for them. It's reflecting in the standings, and it's also reflecting in the vibes around that team. They're playing really good basketball, and they're going to be a force. They're going to be a force in the Eastern Conference for somebody. I think that one of the best things about this year is that the East heard the noise. The Eastern Conference heard the noise around, oh, Jason Tatum's out. Oh, they traded Damian Lillard back over to the Portland Trailblazers, but he was going to play anyway. Tyrese Halliburton is out. I mean, go down that list, right? You enter the season and everybody's discounting your entire conference outside of like 2 teams. because two guys got hurt. This season, the Indiana Pacers obviously fell off a cliff much further than we could have expected. I mean, don't get me wrong, Tyrese Halliburton is a really great player, but I don't think anybody thought that he was so impactful that they would go from being an NBA Finals team, a team that made the NBA Eastern Conference Finals in back-to-back seasons, to being a team that like might be picking at the top of the lottery this year. So shout out to Tyrese, I guess, I think is the way that you would address that without being a hater, right? But the other aspect of it is like, look at some of the teams around that. The Bulls started off the season red hot, and they're coming back down to earth a little bit more, but they're a team that has been, very competitive so far through the year. The Detroit Pistons are the best team in the Eastern Conference and like arguably like the second or third best team in basketball right now. The Cleveland Cavaliers, I think when they get healthy, they're going to be fine. Their biggest issue is just they have had guys in and out of the lineup too infrequently. Um, the New York Knicks, of course, they have the Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby issues that they have, but and Jalen Brunson is, he's back on the floor now, but still, he's a guy that you have to monitor because he tends to pick up knick-knack injuries throughout the season constantly. But they're in the mix as well. This Eastern Conference, I think if you had to take away anything from the first quarter of the NBA season, is that if you are a fan of an Eastern Conference team, like you just have to be proud of the Eastern Conference as a whole right now. Because for the most part, the Eastern Conference, it feels like they've heard all of the noise coming into the season of like, oh, it's a two-team conference. The question is more so about who's gonna make it to the finals, and that's gonna be the team that outside of really them is really nobody else in the mix. The championship goes through the West, and maybe all of those things are accurate. But so far to start out the season, the East as a whole has been very competitive. The East as a whole, I feel like, heard all of the hoopla in the background about how they were going to be down this year. And instead, everybody's come out swinging and playing some of their best basketball. And yes, is it going to humble itself later on? Sure. You still have the Brooklyn Nets of the world who might mess around and move a Michael Porter Jr. They might move a Nicholas Claxton. They might try to see if they can attach Cam Thomas to somebody so that they don't have to re-up on his contract this upcoming summer or deal with the fact that he walks away for nothing in unrestricted free agency. You never know, right? You have teams like that towards the bottom. The Charlotte Hornets, despite the fact that Conker Nipple was an absolute stud, Ryan Kalkbrenner is a really solid player as a rookie as well. The Brandon Miller injury held them back early in the season. He's back now. LaMelo Ball, I know there's the trade rumors around that. We discussed that on the podcast recently as well, but we know they're towards the bottom of the barrel, but they're a good basketball team. The record doesn't reflect for them that they are playing much better basketball this season than they've done in recent memory. So I'm just really proud of the Eastern Conference as a whole. That's a little side tangent attached to the Raptors, but I think the Raptors are the true poster child, even over a team like Detroit, who I think a lot of people had really high expectations for this season, or at least decently high expectations for, coming off of what was a really spectacular season last year. I think Toronto, there was real question marks about where they really fit in the Eastern Conference hierarchy. And especially with all of the East is down conversations, the Toronto Raptors were right there in the mix of those teams that was like going to be scrappy enough to be decent. Maybe they fight themselves into a play-in slash low seeded playoff spot. But like, are they really on anything? And so far this season, they're showing, yes, they are on something. They're on something that's winning in basketball games. They're on something that's going to make them really interesting as a postseason team. And they're playing above their weight right now, man. They're playing above their weight right now.